So they made up a situation where they say, hey, oh, it's for the greater good, please. Oh, you're going to get it right back. I promise. You're going to get the island right back. I swear. I swear you're going to get your island back. Do you think these people got their island back, child? Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Madiswan channel. My name is Madison, and I have a new mic. Yes, bitch. But, yeah, I need a stand for this, baby. But today we're going to be holding it like this. I'm excited to use it. I got it for my birthday. Shouts out to you, Dad. But today we are going to be doing another installment of True Crime in Society, the second episode this year. And today we're going to be discussing the nuclear testing at Bikini Atoll. But before we get into everything, if you're new here, if you found me on TikTok, if you found me on social media, like and subscribe, comment down below, hit that notification bell if you love the content and you want to stick around for more. I would highly, highly appreciate it. And make sure to watch my ads, of course, because your girl is semi-newly monetized, and it would be great if you would support the channel by watching all the ads that I have on my videos. If you are returning, thank you. Love you so, so much. Thank you for coming back. I am so excited, so blessed. Comment down below. Let me know below if you've ever heard of Bikini Atoll, what we're about to be talking about today. Because so I did a poll in my community tab. Also, before we get into that, look in the description for all my socials. I'm very active on my community tab, child. So if you want to participate in helping me decide between videos or just answering questions to help me foster more of a community vibe with my almost 8.4K people in this subscriber group, in this family, then definitely check out my community tab because I'm very active there. All my socials are below, so feel free to follow all of this stuff. I also want to do a little bit of housekeeping really quickly. So the first thing that I'm going to say is next week I will be starting my other new series of the year called YouTube Tips for Lazy Bitch, if you know what I mean. And we are going to be discussing my behind the scenes documentation of my first year on YouTube. I completed my first year earlier this month. Yay, we're so happy about that. And I just wanted to help people who want to be content creators, who want to be on YouTube, who want to gain a following on YouTube, who are truly beginners, know what I learned on my own to get to where I am in my first year. I'm very proud of it. Now I'm trying to sustain it and grow it in this next year, so we'll see how I do. But I have a lot of tips that I learned on my own, a lot of things that I will tell you to not do, a lot of things I will tell you to do. So I decided to start a series once a month. I'm going to go live on here where you guys can ask me questions and we'll get into the things. We'll talk about where I started, what my original concept for the channel is, how I think you should plan out your channel and plan out your content creation, all of the different things. We'll be discussing that. So my very first installment is happening next Thursday at 7:30 p.m. I'm going to be going live, and we're going to be fully discussing the top 5 things that you need to know before you start a YouTube channel. So before you even begin to think about starting a YouTube channel, these are the 5 things you must do, in my opinion. So be there, be square. I'm down to also answer any other questions that you have for me. We can do a Q&A type vibe once I get all the info off my chest. But of course, that is next week, so be prepared for that. So anyway, let's get into the nuclear testing of Bikini Atoll and the displacement of the Bikinian people because of that. Let's get into it. And why I think it's a true crime story. Yay! Okay, let's talk about it. So, Bikini Atoll is something that you may or may not have learned about in like AP US history. I know that's where I learned about it for the first time. We watched a documentary called Radio Bikini, and it's kind of, now that I look back on it, you can find it on YouTube, first of all. It's like an hour and a half. It's definitely a American propaganda film talking about our scientific achievements and all of that kind of thing. And talking about the island and talking about how the Bikinians were so happy to leave and all of this kind of stuff. But that was my first introduction to it, was in actual history class in high school. I did a poll on my community tab, and I found that a lot of people had not learned about it at all or hadn't learned about it in high school. And I was moved, or this topic came to mind when I was trying to structure what I was going to talk about this year. And I was like, I'm sure what I was told in A Push, there's a more nefarious, darker side of this conversation. So let me go check it out. And I researched it. I was like, this is a true crime story if I've ever seen one. So we're going to talk about it on the channel. So I'm really excited to talk about it because I feel like people don't talk about it. Whatever. Also, I'm going to be talking about it in the lens of how I talked about my the Agent Orange video I did, as well as the Tuskegee experiment that I did. So if you're new here, come close, because this little disclaimer is for you. This is not your mama's true crime YouTube channel where I tell stories and I put makeup on, and this is not that. This channel has two mission statements. The first one is to center BIPOC individual stories, to center BIPOC people in general in the topic of the true crime space, because for so many years, for so much of this genre, for the fact that this genre is so big and widely searched and everyone's obsessed with it at this point in time with podcasts and YouTube channels and everything, so many people repeat and recycle the same 5 stories. And I'm tired of it. Not saying those stories aren't tragic, not saying that those stories don't deserve to be told, but there's a million and one other stories that people are ignoring, but they want the views. So they say and continue to hammer down stories like Lacey Peterson, Casey Anthony. They talk about JonBenet Ramsey until their face is blue. This is not this channel. This channel is anti-missing white woman syndrome. It is anti-centering white victims. I'm so sorry, but I'm just keeping it a buck with y'all. We are centering BIPOC people, BIPOC stories on this channel. So that's the first part of my mission statement. Second part of my mission statement is I also want to widen what people conceive to be a true crime story. So if you notice, if you look at my catalog, I have some true crime stories that are more traditional, where there's a serial killer or kidnapper or cult or something of that nature. But I also mix it in with true crime stories that I believe to be true crime stories that are really, as people would probably categorize them, history. But I think a lot of war crimes, atrocities, genocides, governmental experiments on POC people, all of those stories deserve to be brought to light because I truly believe they were criminal. I truly believe they were vile. I truly believe they were sadistic. And I truly believe they were true crime stories. So we're widening the definition of what a true crime story is, what it could be on this channel. So just be aware of that. That's why we're talking about Bikini Atoll, which on its head probably isn't a traditional true crime story, but to me, I smell true crime all over it. So a little background on what Bikini Atoll is. Bikini Atoll is actually a place. It is a part of the Marshall Islands, and it was created from a volcanic eruption. It's a very small island, and on it, inhabiting it for generations was around a little over 160 Bikinians, as I like to call them, who were indigenous to the land, to the Marshall Island, and had lived there for generations at a time. Okay, so think of it as like just a tiny, tiny little island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Okay, so again, like I said, the population of this island was small, but this was their island. This is where they had been for generations. They would fish in the lagoon. There was lots of different things that, they could fish, they could farm, they could do all of these things, and their history was there, their people were there, the generations of Bikinians had grown up and died on that island. And then in 1946, the United States Navy came to the island and talked to basically the leader of the Bikinian people and basically asked, hey, can we borrow this island for the good of mankind, quote unquote? And I just want to pause here really, really quick because I've gone on rants about the greater good. I went on a rant in my Agent Orange story, which I will link below, as well as my conversation about the Tuskegee experiment. But there is this prolific saying in all of American history, which is always about the greater good, the sacrifice of some for the benefit of many. And for some reason, that's only ever hammered home or pitched to for people who are poor, black, indigenous, disabled, whatever you want to call it. We are always the people who are told that we have to sacrifice for the greater good of the community. And you have to think about that, because if the greater good of the community comes at the expense of a very, very specific marginalized groups of people every single time, you have to think, what is the greater good that these people are sacrificing for? Who is that? Who encapsulates the greater good? We all know who it is, child. Okay? But people don't want to be plain and make it plain about that conversation. So imagine this. It's 1946. Your people have been living on this little island for generations and generations successfully. And the United States Army, through geopolitics and imperialism or whatever you want to talk about it, has gotten possession of your island through whatever colonialism way they did. They come to your island and say, hey, you need to sacrifice your island for the greater good of the people of the world. We're going to borrow it and we are going to give it back to you. Let's put a pin in that. So naturally, he agreed. He was like, okay, cool. Like, the greater good, okay, you're borrowing it, which means we're definitely going to get it back. I can feel that. I can dig that. So in 1946, there was an agreement made, and the Bikinians on Bikini Atoll were moved to a different island. And what was the greater good, you wonder? The greater good was the United States government wanted to use Bikini Atoll to experiment on the power of what a nuclear bomb can do, specifically what it can do to a Navy ship. Mind you, this is 1946. So Nagasaki, Hiroshima, which we'll be talking about in May, so stay tuned for those true crime videos, that had already happened. The bombs detonated that ended up being detonated on Bikini Atoll were 1,000,000 times more powerful than that of what happened to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But that's besides the point. This is post us dropping those bombs on those civilians, and now we're in this stage of scientific exploration, scientific experimentation. So they wanted to really experiment with these bombs to see what is the damage that can be caused by them, especially in water, especially on ships, and all of that kind of thing. So they stole this island, basically. The United States government picked Bikini Atoll because it was perfectly placed in this area in the Pacific Ocean. It was a 2-hour flight away from the nearest naval base, and according to what the United States government researched, there were no valuable people who lived nearby, meaning no big populations of people, meaning no populations of people. Because naturally, as we know, with most of American history, there were people already living and flourishing on the land. They were stealing it from these people, as we know, displacing these people, as we know, but the research that they conducted concluded that this would be the perfect place to do these nuclear bomb tests because there were no valuable people nearby. We're going to put another pin in that because, baby, insulting. So in 1946, come to Bikini Atoll, agree, make a treaty, decide to do the thing, and they detonate 2 bombs, one above the water and one below the water. And there's a huge crater under Bikini Atoll that can still be seen today because of the damage that that bomb did. They wanted to experiment with how a bomb would react underwater. So this was the beginning of about 20 bombs that were detonated all over Bikini Atoll, in the water, around the perimeter, you name it, they bombed it. All in the name of scientific research, so they say. I want to pause here and talk about the pure entitlement of the United States government. Because let's put this in perspective, right? These over 160 people have lived on this island for generation, have lived and died here, have fished here, know this island, know how to produce on this island, have traditions on this island, have history on this island. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is an invaluable piece of land to these 160 people. To the United States government, it's merely a tool for them to experiment these fucking bombs on, right? To these people, this is their home. This is their land. This is their sovereignty. This is where history is made for them. This is where traditions are made for them. This is how they get their food. This is all they know. And they make this agreement with the United States government because the United States government said you need to do this for the greater good of the people, but also at the end of the day, they owned the Marshall Islands through imperialism. So even if the Bikinians were hostile, it's only 160 of them realistically in the United States mind. So either way, the bomb testing was going to happen on Bikini, but it's better if the people go in peace. So they made up a situation where they say, hey, oh, it's for the greater good, please. Oh, you're going to get it right back. I promise. You're going to get the island right back. I swear you're going to get your island back. Do you think these people got their island back, child? This is a tactic, the bait and switch tactic, I like to kind of say about it, because it was used on the Native Americans, it was used on slaves, it was used on any marginalized community in general. This promising of legacy, this promising of importance, this manipulation through emotion about land, about things, about material stuff, when in actuality, the United States government always has its fingers crossed behind its back whenever it's making a deal, because the truth is, one, either they don't research enough about what they're doing on a particular piece of land to understand the effects that it'll have on the people in time, or they just don't care. Either way, it's never going to be the same. And these people who have history on this land, on this island, we literally will never ever be able to live on this island again after what they do. So like I said, the location of Bikini was ideal because it was a 2-hour flight away to the nearest naval base, and it also had this huge lagoon in the southern part of it, which could hold all of the naval ships that they wanted to experiment on when they detonated these bombs. So let's kind of fast forward to the mindset of the American government fresh off of World War II. We bombed Japan twice, and at this point, a lot of nuclear testing had been happening in secret, had been happening in places like Nevada, I think New Mexico. There are some secret nuclear testings that were happening, but none of the testing had been able to be happening in the open eyes, and had been able to be properly documented the way they want it to be documented in order to, let the scientific process work, because they were preparing to drop those bombs in wartime. So they weren't trying to have it be this loud, live, and color thing where people or spies of other countries could let it be known that they were working on this. So this is one of the first times that the United States government is able to openly experiment, let the scientific process hold when it comes to nuclear bombs and nuclear weapons and atomic weapons. So they were trying everything. The catalyst for this was obviously to see how a bomb would react in the water with the Navy, with naval ships. But the other part of it was they were just generally trying to document the different levels, the different power, and have it written and have data collected for what these bombs can actually do. Now, a fun fact about the whole Bikini Atoll experiment in general is that half of the film in the entire world was collected in order to document what happened on Bikini Atoll and have it on film and preserved. Let me say that again. Half the film to film something, to film this, in the entire world was collected by the United States government in order to document the Bikini Atoll explosions, which is crazy. Like, that's how small the world used to be. To me, it's so silly and kooky and crazy that this nuclear experiment that we barely talk about in history, if you even get there, has such cultural relevance. As you may have noticed, I put at the beginning of this part, a clip of the iconic show SpongeBob SquarePants, which came out in the 90s, of course. And as most people assume with cartoons, it's outrageous, it's funky, it's silly, it's fun. None of this could happen in real life. We know you have to suspend reality for, cartoons. We know that. But did you know that SpongeBob SquarePants, where they live, where every character in SpongeBob SquarePants lives, in Bikini Bottom, is based on the nuclear testing at Bikini Atoll? Did you know that? Did you know that the creators of SpongeBob frickin' SquarePants thought to themselves, as a baseline, as a plot line, as a narrative thing for their TV show in the 90s, which became one of the most amazing cartoons ever created? Their concept for this was, what would happen to the wildlife, to the sea life underneath the ocean of Bikini Atoll after all the nuclear bombings and all the radioactivity had settled into the sea, into the soil? What would happen to those sea creatures? And you have SpongeBob SquarePants. That's why it's called Bikini Bottom. Another super culturally relevant thing that Bikini Atoll was credited with being a reference to was literally the bikini swimsuit, which is crazy. One of the most famous swimsuits ever created, famous swimsuit styles. It was based on... It was called the bikini because that is what the designer of the bikini thought that the women in bikini would wear after a nuclear test or whatever. So there's so many cultural things that are referencing bikini without really talking about the dark history of it, which is always so interesting, which is why I think history is important. Context is everything, because you're able to see these references in everything that you do. SpongeBob, swimsuits, God fucking Zilla. Did you know Godzilla? The lore of Godzilla is based on Bikini Atoll and what happened with the nuclear testing on Bikini Atoll. And Godzilla is a product of the nuclear testing reaction with the sea creature at the bottom of the ocean. Did you know that? Did you know that? Like, isn't that crazy how culturally relevant Bikini Atoll is without anyone knowing the source material? When I was researching this, I was like, this is blowing my mind. Not the bikini, not Godzilla, not SpongeBob SquarePants. Like, honestly, three of the most awesome things to ever be invented are referencing Bikini Atoll, which is, good and bad, because we don't have the context, and the context of what these things are referencing is not widely known. The history of what happened to Bikini and the people there, fall on deaf ears. And we're going to get into that. This is where things turn into a true crime story. So I will insert footage of some of these explosions that happened, these nuclear bomb tests that happened at Bikini Atoll here. But the United States Navy was very underprepared for the level of destruction that these bombs would create. Like I said, they were testing how these bombs would affect a naval fleet of ships. And so they detonated these bombs, and 2 million tons of radioactive water shot about a mile into the air. And due to the radioactive fallout from these bombs, out of 84 ships that were used to, stage this experiment, only 9 were salvageable after these explosions. And this was like destruction that the Navy had not even fathomed they would get on film, let alone see or have data on people. Because at this point, when it came to nuclear bombs, nuclear testing, atomic bombs, and things of that nature, only 3 had ever been tested, ever. period. These were new. This was a new-ish. This was a new hot thing. And two of those were in Japan. So it wasn't even on an ocean. You see what I mean? So the level of destruction couldn't even be like predicted, but it was massive. And of course, here comes the consequences. The other part that I always go back to is they were promised this island they would get back. When I just showed you the explosions. It's like, think about that. The United States government said, we're only borrowing this island, but look what they're doing to it. And think about all that radioactivity, all of it. Because there were at least 20 bombs detonated on Bikini Atoll over the years. So, of course, let's check in with our indigenous Bikinians. They agreed under false pretenses and manipulation to relinquish their land to the United States government for the greater good. At that point, there was a little over 160 residents that were displaced. They were moved around other atolls and small islands in the area, kind of a ways away from Bikini. Other parts of the Marshall Islands, they were moved around a lot. And so in 1948, mind you, they were asked in 1946. So by 1948, they had grown to over 180 residents that were either descendants of people who were originally from Bikini Atoll or they were originally from Bikini Atoll. So at one point, they were also given another island where only a few families moved to, where they tried to establish the coconut kernels that are used to make coconut oil, which is how they trade and interact and, make money for their people and, sell stuff for their people. It worked, but it didn't work. Only a few families stayed on that island that they were given by the United States. Of course, it wasn't home. So in 1970, mind you, they left in 1946. In 1970, 160 Bikinians were told and reassured by the United States government that it was totally safe and it was totally fine for them to move back to Bikini. Of course, it was not. It was covered in radioactivity. It was covered in radioactive fallout. It seeped into the soil. It seeped into the fish. It seeped into the water supply. It seeped into every aspect of their life. And so by 1978, it was fully confirmed that Bikini Atoll was not safe for inhabitants. Everyone was eating radioactive fallout. Everyone was sleeping, breathing, living in radioactive fallout, and for 8 years. So you can already imagine how many people were exposed. Like I said, 160 people moved back after the United States government said it is totally safe for you to move back, which wasn't true. So as a result of that, there was many complications with rare cancers that members of this 106 group had, just rare illnesses, painful chronic illnesses that plagued this group of people who moved back. A lot of people, a lot of women in particular had very rare ovarian cancers. A lot of them had stillbirths because of complications due to the radioactivity. And the women who were able to carry a baby to term who were exposed, a lot of their children had, disabilities, deformities, and things of that nature. And this is where I think, again, I want to pause a little bit, because this is the meat and potatoes of the story as to why I think it's a true crime story. So let's run down things really quick. You're a Bikinian person. You're indigenous to a piece of land that your people have always lived on, fished on, existed on. The United States government wins this group of islands in the geopolitics of the world that you really don't have any reason to pay attention to because you live very remotely. In 1946, after the first 2 atomic bombs are let down on civilians in Japan, the United States government decides that it wants to continue testing nuclear bombs. So they come to your island and promise you not only the fact that you are heroes and you're doing something for the greater good, but you will also get your island back. No strings attached. You will 100% get your island back and you will be able to move back eventually. Over the 1940s and 50s, the United States government bombs your land to oblivion, creates highly, highly toxic levels of radioactive fallout to be seeped into the soil, seeped into the ocean, seeped into the fish that you eat, seeped into your water supply. And you're displaced for about 14 years. You're moved around the Marshall Islands. You're shuttled here, shuttled there. You're given islands. It doesn't work out. You're shuttled here, shuttled there. And eventually, when they're done experimenting on your little piece of heaven, your little spot of land, your home, your little nation, you're able to move back only to find that everything there is completely toxic. Everything there is completely toxic. The level of radiation that these people were living and existing in for 8 years is unheard of. Not only that, you moved back under the distinct reassurance of the United States government saying that it was completely safe for you to move back. It was totally fine. You move back, you live there for 8 years, you start to see people get increasingly ill, you're starting to see people develop cancers, tumors, have developmental issues, be poisoned slowly by the food that they eat, stillbirths. This is what you're seeing, the horror that you're seeing, the horror that you're experiencing because you let the United States government experiment on this land. And they told you that it was 100% safe for you to go and live back there. And by the 1970s, child, the effects of Nagasaki and Hiroshima radioactivity and the relation to the atomic bomb were starting to pepper out. Like, this information was starting to come out, had been around. So for them to think that they could detonate 20 hydrogen atomic nuclear weapons on this small little island over the course of years, and that the people who exist there, who are already deemed not valuable enough to really consider or think about, which is why the location was perfect in the first place, you tell these people, oh yeah, it's totally safe. And you're seeing the people around you slowly die painful deaths, be unable to have children, and all of the things in between. Get gross, get poisoned, have chronic illnesses. All because you trusted the United States government. It's sick. So after 1978, a lot of the Bikinians moved to the capital of the Marshall Islands. A lot of them also moved to the United States proper. And, by 1999, there were 2,600 total Bikinians who were descendants of the original 160 Bikini people who were displaced. 81 of those 2,600 were actual original descendants from the land Bikini. And by 2001, the population grew from 2,600 to 2,800. And by 2016, the population in the Bikini diaspora had grown to about 5,400 people. That's in 2016. 25 of those people were of the original group who was, moved and displaced from the original 160. So some people may look at this story and be like, what's the big deal? They needed to experiment this stuff, blah, blah, blah. They sacrificed for the greater good, whatever you want to talk about. This is American history, whatever developments we got from this experiment, blah, 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 blah. What I see is a bunch of people who were lied to, slowly poisoned and killed and displaced for years. They were eventually able to move back where the land poisoned them, and then by 8 years later, they were completely banned from going back to their home. To their home. Like, think about that. That's so sick. That's so sick. At this point on Bikini, the residents are around 4 to 6, caretakers of the island who keep track of the radioactivity levels, who monitor them, and send it to the United States government. One of them was a descendant from one of the original Bikinians that were displaced by the original testing in 1946. Another aspect that people don't understand, which is another indictment in terms of the true crime part of the story, is the environmental impacts. Like I said, the whole experiment was centered around the effects of what a nuclear bomb would have on a fleet of Navy ships. All of these ships were armed to the teeth, loaded up as if it were truly holding people for combat. All of those ships are still in the bottom of the ocean. All of those ships have bombs, explosive, ammo still on them. All of these ships are leaking, disintegrating poisons and toxic metals into the oceans as we speak, and have been since 1946. The other scary part is that, like I said, there are bombs, ammo, different weapons that are rigged to be able to detonate at any second on these ships that are now on the bottom of the ocean underneath Bikini. So because of this, Bikini has become basically inhabitable, and none of the descendants or the original over 160 Bikinians that were originally displaced and promised their land back will ever likely be able to live effectively on said land. Between all the ships at the bottom of the ocean armed to the teeth that are rigged to explode at any moment, all of the cancerous chemicals and toxic metals that are being seeped into the ocean by these ships, combined with the high level of radioactivity from all of the bombs that took place on that island. There are still plenty of fish there. There's still coconut crabs that you can eat there, but because of the bioaccumulation of the radioactive fallout, no one will ever be able to inhabit that island ever again. No one will ever be able to live there ever again. Ever. The really sad part, at this point, they're 2, 3, 4 generations removed from actually living on Bikini. They will still always be the descendants of, those who lived on Bikini Atoll. But they're 2, 3 generations removed. People who, no longer were able to experience the passing down of traditions that were central to you living in that space. You had to live on Bikini to know the navigation ways, the way to fish on Bikini, the way to gather food, the way to make coconut oil. All of these things are central to their culture as Bikinians, to their existence, to their history, to their traditions that are unable to be passed down effectively because of the displacement of the diaspora. You feel what I'm saying? And in a way, it's almost like a genocide of another name. To me, I would call it a cultural genocide, which is why I lumped this story in with a true crime story. It just kind of ends. These people still exist. They walk among us, as people might say, but the culture has been stripped away from them completely because of nuclear bombs. To me, it's just sick. I have a whole opinion about nuclear weapons and nuclear bombs, child, and we'll probably get more into how I truly feel about that when I do my videos on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But just sit in that reality. This was a genocide. This was a cultural genocide on the Bikini people, because back in 1946, the researchers deemed that their culture was okay. It was up for grabs. There were no valuable populations nearby. They could be the ones to sacrifice for the greater good. And now they will never have their land back, their traditions back. They have been culturally stripped by things that they could only experience on Bikini. They will never be able to live on that island ever again, because of what the United States government did, because they were trying to arm themselves, because of an evil destructive type of weapon that they created in order to kill off as many human beings as possible. It's sick. I have a quote here from a comedian named Bob Hope, who said, he was referring to what happened at Bikini, and he said, "At the end of the war, we found the one place that had been untouched by it and completely blew it to hell." How American is that? Isn't that sick? So I'd just like to conclude with saying that's similar to the Agent Orange, which I will link. I will link the video below, child. I know you're clamoring to hear me drone on about that. The effects of the radioactivity in the soil, as a result of bioaccumulation and the just a crazy amount of radioactivity due to the amount of bombs that were set off in this tiny little island. Like I said, toxicity levels, contamination levels are way too high, and it will continue to affect generations of people to come. Just like Agent Orange, like I said in that video, the last person who will be affected by Agent Orange has not even been born yet, and the war ended in the 70s because of how toxic shit and some chemicals in the soil that are, very strong, are able to be persistent and be passed down from generation to generation and still be present in the soil, present in the water supply, present in the fish, and then it's present in you. So, very similar stories in terms of the poison level and the fact that it's a ripple effect that'll affect generations to come. And secondly, and I think most depressing, all the Navy people who were involved in this experiment ended up, not all of them, but a lot of them got poisoned. They got cancer, of course, because they were all up and through, the radioactivity for the sake of science or whatever the fuck. So there's not only the Bikinians having a cultural genocide, and having their land stolen from them, and a lot of them dying and being poisoned slowly, but also the people physically there who are getting the data for the big wigs in the military and the United States government all also got fucking poisoned, much like Agent Orange. And I'm sure they're not being compensated as much as they should be. And the fucked up part, similar to Agent Orange, just like those people in the armed forces were told that Agent Orange was completely harmless. A lot of these people were told that the radioactive fallout was completely harmless, and they were told to get back on those ships that were able to be salvaged, to use those ships even though they were covered in radioactive fallout and materials. So again, this is not a victimless situation. I don't think it at all was necessary, period. And I think a cultural genocide, no matter how small the culture, is still a genocide. And it's sad. It's a sad, 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 sad story. But Bikini is something that we reference all the time without actually talking about it. And I wanted to talk about it. I wanted us to have reverence for those indigenous Bikinians that had been displaced, that had been poisoned, that had been killed by the bombs. And I just want to, again, expose the U.S. government for their shady tactics and their colonialistic ways. That being said, without further ado, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please stick around and subscribe. Press that notification bell if you are not already subscribed to this channel. Okay. I love you. I actually love the mic like this. I think it's funky and cool. So I think I might keep it for a while before I get a stand. Also, for those returning, I love you so much. Comment below, like the video. It helps it in the algorithm. You had watched my ads, you B-words. I'm going live next Thursday at 7:30 to talk about content creation and answer any questions that you want to ask me, child. I'll be going live once a month from now on, the last week of the month, so stay tuned for that. And yeah. Without further ado, I guess all I have to say is Black Lives Matter and free Palestine until it's backwards. Love you very much. Thank you for watching.